The Woman Who Disappeared by Philip Prowse.
Chapter 5. Meyer and Meyer. I woke up with a terrible pain in my head. I was lying on the floor outside the front door of Miss Elaine Garfield's apartment. I looked around. The man with the gun and his red-haired friend had left. I was alone, and I had a terrible headache. I got up slowly and felt my head gently to see if there was any blood. There wasn't any blood, but my head was still very painful. I decided to go back to the office and go to bed. There was no sign of the porter at the entrance to the Manson building. I walked out of the door and across to the old gray Chrysler. I drove slowly back to the office. The telephone was ringing when I arrived at the office. I went in quickly and answered it. Samuel speaking.
"Listen, Samuel," replied a voice. "Forget about Elaine Garfield. We hurt you a little in her apartment. If you don't forget all about Elaine Garfield, we'll hurt you a lot more."
Who are you? I asked. But there was no answer. The man had put down the telephone. I decided to do what the man had told me. I would forget all about Elaine Garfield for 10 hours. After a good night's sleep, I would look for Elaine Garfield. I would also try to find the man with the gun and his friend Joe. I lay down on the hard, low bed and went straight to sleep. I woke up the next morning at 8 o'clock. I felt my head carefully, but it did not hurt so much now. I left the office and went across the street to the cafe where I usually had breakfast. I drank a glass of orange juice, ate some fresh toast, and drank several cups of coffee. I read the morning newspapers. There was a lot of news, but nothing about Miss Elaine Garfield. I looked at my watch, left the cafe, and walked over to the Chrysler. By 9 o'clock, I was outside the Title Insurance Building. At 3 minutes past 9, I was standing outside the door of Meyer and Meyer, attorneys. At 20 past 9, I was still standing outside the door. Nobody had arrived yet to work. At 9:30, the first secretary arrived, and at 18 minutes to 10, I was sitting in Mr. Meyer's office. "Well, Mr. Meyer," I said, "my name's Samuel, and I'm a private detective." "I'm pleased to meet you," Mr. Meyer said politely. He was about 55 years old, with a gray suit, gray hair, and a gray face. "Does Miss Elaine Garfield work here?" I asked. "Yes, she does," Mr. Meyer said, "but she hasn't been to work since Monday. Why do you want to see Elaine?" "Her sister has asked me to help find her," I replied. "Can you think of anything Elaine said or did which could explain her disappearance?" Mr. Meyer scratched his head. "No," he said, "I'm afraid I can't help you." "Who did Elaine work with?" I asked. Mr. Meyer looked at me. "Why do you say, 'Who did Elaine work with,' and not, 'Who does Elaine work with?' Elaine's not dead, is she?" he asked. I looked straight back at Mr. Meyer. "I don't know if Elaine is dead or not," I said. "Would you be very sad if she was dead?" "Yes, of course I would be sad," Mr. Meyer replied angrily. "Are you trying to suggest that I know where Elaine is?" I smiled. "Now, don't get excited, Mr. Meyer," I said. "Can you tell me the name of anyone who works with Elaine? Anyone who shares a desk with her or works in the same room?" "Yes," Mr. Meyer said. "That's easy. Elaine shares a room with Susie Graham." I got up. "Thank you very much, Mr. Meyer," I said. "Where is Susie Graham's office, please?" "It's along the corridor," said Mr. Meyer. "The third door on the left." I thanked Mr. Meyer again and walked to the door. "Oh, Mr. Samuel," Mr. Meyer said, "I'm sorry that I got angry, but you understand that I don't want—" "Yes, I understand," I interrupted. "You don't want dirty private detectives in your nice, clean office." I walked out of Mr. Meyer's office and banged the door behind me. I walked slowly down the corridor and knocked on the third door on the left.
Come in,
said a voice. So I went into the room. Are you Susie Graham? I asked.
Yes,
said the girl sitting at the desk.
I'm Susie.
I smiled at her. Susie was the kind of girl everyone smiled at. She was small and slim and had a pair of beautiful brown eyes.
What can I do to help you?
Susie asked. I smiled again. I'd like to ask you some questions, Miss Graham.
Don't call me Miss Graham,
the girl said.
You can call me Susie.
Well, Susie, I said, I would like to ask you some questions about a friend of yours. Her name is Elaine Garfield. Susie stopped smiling.
Yes, all right, she said, but I don't want to talk about Elaine here in the office.
Right, I replied. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll go out and find a cafe. I'll buy you a cup of coffee, and you can tell me about Elaine. All right? Susie cheered up and looked much happier.
I'd like to have a cup of coffee, she said, but Mr. Meyer might get angry if I leave the office.
Don't worry about Mr. Meyer, I said with a big smile. Mr. Meyer and I are great friends.